The member for Kandui, Honorable John Makali.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for the opportunity to also weigh in on this motion. At the outset, let me thank my colleague and member for Westlands, Honorable Timo Anyonyi, for bringing this motion. Mr. Speaker, it is not denied that land is such a critical and valued asset in our communities. It is not also denied that at the moment where we are, we have a lot of problems touching on how we use our land. Taking into effect the importance of land, the Constitution of Kenya and the framers of the Constitution dedicated a whole chapter to issues of land use, to issues of land, classified land, and they gave responsibilities to this House to develop rules and regulations and legislation to bring into effect the provisions that are in the land chapter in the Constitution. This motion seeks to have a policy framework that will regulate land use. The first question I asked myself, Honorable Speaker, is do we have a policy framework or we don't? My answer to it, I've tried to speak, is that we have a policy framework. What we need to do is literally to revisit it and ask ourselves, is the policy framework in force serving us very well or not serving us very well? We take cognizance of the fact that agriculture contributes around 22% of our gross domestic product. Many of our people are employed in the agricultural sector. When we make our budgets here, we dedicate a lot of resources, though not sufficient, towards agricultural development. But if we look at our country, we have had so many cases, we have had disputes. When you go back to our courts, you will find a lot of disputes touching on ownership of land and issues of inheritance. That's why we have created the environment and land courts, taking into cognizance the importance of land. We have had many succession disputes in our courts on how land needs to be utilized, how land needs to be used. The question we need to ask ourselves is, are we on the right path or we are not on the right path? Kenya's land, 17%, is only 17% of Kenya's land mass that is arable land. And at independence, we committed ourselves to fighting hunger. The Asian tigers, specifically Malaysia, have reached where they have reached because of having proper land use programs. I support this motion that we need as a House to go back and as a ministry, or not only the Ministry of Land and Urban and Physical Planning, but in conjunction with the Ministry of Agriculture, which is charged with the purposes of developing agriculture in our country, so that we can have a proper policy framework that will assist us in having proper land use programs in our country. In so doing, we will not be reinventing the wheel. Honorable Speaker, you remember we used to have the Land Control Act that was geared towards, when the approvals for land development were to be given, we had to go through a committee, a land control board that was actually to do the approvals. But what happened to those boards? I think they were politicized, they never got to do their work. And the urge that was there was basically anybody wanting to develop land, the approvals were being given in boardrooms. No regard was being had to the development somebody was going to do on the land. That's why you have a place like in Western Kenya, you'll not find somebody who has a whole 10 acres. Lands have been fragmented into small portions of 50 by 100, which cannot be economically used. So, Mr. Speaker, I actually support this particular motion, that we need to have a relook of the entire legislations we have and the regulations we have towards land use, so that we can be able to have a way forward. Because if we do not, we are threatened, we're not going to have proper food security. Every now and then somebody buys land, you will find that somebody wants to go and, there's this obsession of brick and mortar and concrete. We want to go and develop and put up structures. Nobody is thinking about setting aside land for purposes of agricultural development. And even in those areas where land had been specifically set aside for agricultural development, like the ADC farms in Kitale, in Trans Nzoia, for example, you'll find they have actually been encroached on by, land grabbers, and we now don't have any sufficient parcels for agricultural development. And this is not only for agricultural development. We must also begin to move aside and set aside land for you know, like what he has put up in the motion for well-built environment, like what we are doing now in developing affordable housing, so that we can be able to safeguard land for purposes of agricultural development. So they can have places set aside for residents, places set aside for agricultural development, so that we can be a food secure nation. Honorable Speaker, I actually support this motion. It's well thought out. And we need also, as we move on, because Article 66, the chapter on land in the Constitution of Kenya, has literally classified land into three groups: public land, community land, and private land. When we were in school doing our land law, we were saying the absolute proprietorship title was a title for abuse and disabuse. So we need also to relook into it and do a lot of sensitization, that even if you have an absolute title, it is not absolute in the sense that you can do really anything you want upon it. We need to do a lot of sensitization so that say we must have planned development for the sake of our country and the sake of future generations. With those remarks, Honorable Speaker, I support this motion and urge that this House passes it. Thank you.